Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's baking blog. Today I'm going to be making some bread. Now this is going to be a plaited or braided bread. It was something which they did on the Great British Bake Off a few years back from a Paul Hollywood recipe, and the braiding is a little bit complicated, but hopefully I'll manage that. We'll see how it turns out. If I do it properly, it should look quite good. Now, fairly straightforward ingredients. I'm making one change to Paul Hollywood's recipe, but we start off with 500 grams of strong white bread flour, 7 grams of easy bake or fast action yeast. That's the yeast that you put into the ingredients dry, you don't ferment it. 1 1/4 teaspoons of salt, 1 1/2 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm adding, which is not in the recipe normally, 2 teaspoons of caster sugar. That's just to give it a little bit of, just a touch of sweetness to the bread. And then you'll need an egg for brushing over the top when it's all finished. I've also oiled a bowl ready to allow the bread to prove. And so the first thing to do is to put our flour into the bread mixer fitted with the dough hook. Now again, in the Paul Hollywood recipe, all this is done by hand, but I'm not in the mood for kneading the bread, so we'll do it in the mixer. And then we add our yeast on one side, and as always the salt goes on the other side so that they don't come into contact at this stage. Then I'm just going to put the sugar in. And then I'm just going to mix this around to get the ingredients mixing a little bit. And I'll take a spatula just to help that process just a little bit. Then we pour in our olive oil and 3/4 of our water. Now the water here that I have is 340 millilitres, that's about 12 fluid ounces. We'll retain a little bit for later, so we can add that as we mix, and then we're going to start to mix this dough, and we're going to knead it until it's nice and smooth. And if necessary, we'll add more water as we go. Now if you're kneading this by hand, you need to do it for at least 10 minutes. I'm going to do it in the mixer here for 8 to 10 minutes until we've got a nice smooth dough. Okay, so I've let that knead for 10 minutes. I can still feel that it's a little bit sticky, but that will be fine. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to turn that out onto the mat, which I have lightly floured, very lightly. I added most of my water. It may well be that I could have added just slightly less, but I don't think it will make too much of a difference. And I'm going to form this into a ball, and then we're going to put it into our greased bowl and allow it to prove for an hour so that it can double in size. So I'm just going to rub that in the flour just a little bit, like that. Give it a bit of a knead. And there we have it. I'm going to put it in the bowl, and I'm actually going to put it in top down and then turn it over and just run it around just a little bit. That's just to coat it in the grease like that. And then what I'm going to do is cover that with some tin foil and set it to one side to rise for an hour. And then when we come back, what we're going to do is divide it into 8 equal pieces, roll them out into sausage shapes about 16 inches long, which is about that long, and then we're going to plait them or braid them together into a pattern. If I get it right, it will look fine. This is the sort of bread I think that would go very well with soup or with some Brussels pate or something, chicken liver pate. Very nice for that. So I'll be back with you in an hour's time when this has doubled in size, and we'll go on to the next stage. Okay, so our dough has been resting and proving for an hour, so I'm going to tip it out onto the lightly floured surface and just knock it back. I put some paper under this this mat because I want to use that later. So what we have to do is to cut this into 4 pieces. I'm just going to roll it again onto that flour, just make it slightly easier to work with, and I can always put some more flour down. So what I want to do is get this into a ball. And knock the air out as we go. And then I'm going to cut that into 8 pieces. There we have our 8 pieces, and I'm going to roll each of these into a sort of sausage shape. That's about 16 inches long. Starting from the middle and going out, because we want them to be of a sort of equal thickness. So that's not long enough yet. I don't want to put too much flour on them. So I've rolled these out into a sausage, and I've splayed them out a little bit, as you can see, and I've just pinched them together at the top there. Now what we've got to do is to plait them or braid them. Now I'm departing from Paul Hollywood's recipe on this and trying out a different way of doing it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say these are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm going to take number 8 and pass it over number 1. Then I'm going to take number 2, which was number 1, it's now number 2, and I'm going to cross that over number 8. And this was 7, it now becomes 8. It then became 8, it's now 7 again. And then I'm going to take 1 and place it in the middle of these 6. So just place that in the middle there like that. And so it goes in between 4 and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I'm going to take 7 and cross it over the new number 1. So 7 goes over number 1 like that. I'm going to take 8 and place it between 4 and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that goes over in between 5 like that. And then I'm going to take 2, which is this second one here, and cross it over number 8, like that. And I'm going to take number 1 and place it between 4 and 5. If they tend to be sticking a little bit, I'm going to take just a little bit of flour and just dust it just a little bit like that to try and stop them from sticking. I don't want to use too much flour, so it was a question of taking 1 and placing it between 4 and 5 like that. And then I'm going to take 7 and cross it over number 1. That's the number 1 there. And then I'm going to take 8 and place it between 4 and 5. 8 goes between 4 and 5, like that. And we're just repeating this process now, you see. And then we take 2 and cross it over number 8, like that. And then we're back to taking 1 and placing it between 4 and 5. 1, and you just tuck that under like that. And I'm not going to try to lift that up and place it on there. What I'm going to do is get some scissors and cut that paper. And then I'm going to slide that onto the baking tray. Like that. Now I'm going to let that prove for another hour. I'm just going to cover it. It proves for an hour. Then I'm going to give it an egg wash and we're going to bake it in the oven. So the oven will need to be preheated to 200 Celsius or 180 Celsius with a fan. That's 375 Fahrenheit. Ready for this to go in the oven after we've done the egg wash. So, okay, so our dough has now proved for a further hour. It's risen quite nicely. So what I'm going to do is just apply an egg wash. Now I should say that when I gave the oven temperatures, I took them from Paul Hollywood's recipe, and he said 200 Celsius and he said 375 Fahrenheit. Well, 375 Fahrenheit is actually 190 Celsius. So I don't quite know why he would say that. But if you're cooking in Fahrenheit, you may want to put it up to 400, which is what 200 Celsius usually equates to. So we'll just brush all over this, and then we're going to bake it for 20 to 25 minutes, so that when you tap the bottom of it, it sounds hollow, which will indicate that the dough inside is cooked. As you can see, mine is fatter at one end than it is at the other, and as much as anything that's because I had to pull some of the strands. It's one of the things with dough that I find that it rather likes, when you roll it out in sausages, to contract, and there's not a lot you can do about it. And so first of all, it's difficult to roll 8 strands exactly the same thickness and exactly the same length, and then it's difficult to stop them from contracting. So I think it looks okay. And on my blog, what I've actually said is that if you want a taller loaf rather than a long one, then you would actually make your sausages of dough shorter and fatter, so that you wouldn't have as many plats, but the loaf would rise that little bit more. This bread, I think, is going to be ideal for eating with a nice bowl of soup, or with some pate, Brussels pate or chicken liver pate or something like that. So I'm going to put this in the oven now, and I'm going to bake it for 20 to 25 minutes, and then take it out and let it cool, and then I'll be back with you to show you what it looks like. Okay, so our loaf is out of the oven. I've let it cool down and this is what it looks like. I think it looks quite good. If I'd managed to get the sausage strands completely even, then these would have been slightly larger, but I think it looks quite good. I'm just going to cut the end off and eat the end. So you can see it's got a nice crumb to it, nicely cooked. It tastes very, very good. And it's ideal, as I say, to have with some soup or with anything. You could even toast it if you wanted to. So, if you've enjoyed this video, please click on the thumbs up below the video and on the subscribe button below the video to subscribe to my channel. And the recipe will have a link below the video as well, but also in the top left corner here there is an eye. If you click on that eye, you can click to go directly to the recipe anytime you want to. And I think that should open in a new window as well. So that's it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it and you'll join me again soon when I have something else for you. So until then, happy baking.